gonna do some really simple silhouette acrylic paintings, and this is really for the beginning painter where you just want to practice on mixing colors in the background, and then you don't want your foreground to be too technical. You just want to focus on the wash part on the background. Normally when it comes to the fine art portion of painting, we do what we call an underdrawing, so we have kind of an idea of where everything is sitting, and then we start painting. But for this one, we're gonna go ahead and just hop right into our background. Okay, so I've laid out some of my basic colors. These are basic acrylic paints that I use sometimes when I'm just doing really quick, simple projects. This is a flat brush and a pointed brush. These are for details, and of course the flat one's going to be for the background because we're going to be pulling a lot of sky colors. I also have water to wash my brush in, paper towel. To start with, I want you to think about the fact that this is going to end up being a horizon because this is going to end up being a tropical scene. And I use small amounts of acrylic, and because the actual colors of this painting are pulled across, which I'll show you that technique here in a second, I'm gonna know that the top of the night sky is gonna be more of blues, dark blues, purples, because the sun is setting. So I'm gonna put a little bit of purple. The way that they interact with each other is important. This blue that I just added is of course a little bit darker, but giving it some different tones. You can use as many colors that kind of go in your night sky as you'd like. The purple tones kind of sit more toward the base of it because of course the sun is setting, so reds when they mix with blues ends up being purple. And I'm just kind of dotting my colors. You don't want to use a ton of paint, you just want little dots of paint. And this is partially because when we pull this paint across, we want all of those different colors to kind of mix. Darker hues, blues, purples. We're gonna get a tiny bit of light blue going on in here just because our sky would eventually be fading out a tiny bit. So I put a little light blue because it starts to creep toward the purple category. I'm gonna also add some reds up in here. And then of course yellows are gonna come into play because as we do our reds, which we're gonna put fewer dots of reds as we get closer to where the sun is. So we have more of an orange yellow, which turns more orange when it's mixed in with the reds. Then I'm gonna put some yellow in with my oranges and reds, and especially toward the center areas, because as we get here toward the bottom, there's gonna be more yellow in our backgrounds, and white because our sun's gonna be there, and maybe some little flecks of blue. The biggest difference between sunrises and sunsets is there's more green in sunrises because the yellow and the blue are mixing more together. Then in sunsets there's more purple. So there might be a tiny bit of green I put here with my blue and my yellow dot, and that just makes it so it's a little bit more authentic, especially because I don't have any clouds going on. So when I start pulling my paint, you'll see that I'm going to start pulling it across. You're going to see that it's going to start bringing those colors together. Some spots are going to be a little bit more saturated than others. Now I'm kind of picky, so like as I'm going down, I really want to make sure my blues and my oranges don't make the neutral gray. So I just rinse my brush between when I start to hit this red orange area. You'll see I'm going to start bringing it across a little less and then back up. I'm going to rinse it again because I want to make sure that this little bit stays more of a pure color. Notice my strokes go all the way across my canvas or my paper. I'm going to start bringing this white more up the center, and I'm even going to add a little bit more white to this so that it actually starts looking like sunrises. And I'm just gonna smooth it straight across now that I have everything the place that I want it. I'm gonna add a tiny bit of white. And I did a good chunk of it because it's gonna be worked into some areas. The majority of this is gonna be sun. So we're gonna go back and forth, largest part of our sun. And it's gonna get smoother and smoother. We're just gonna kind of blend it a bit here. And then we're gonna do a dry brush pull across. So I'm gonna rinse my brush again. And then we're gonna pull it. So this kind of becomes more like rays. I'm gonna grab it from the center, just pull it straight across. Notice that as I dab over here, that's because this is my tape, it's gonna come off. All right, I'm gonna make it a little bit more white here. So now we have kind of a sunset sky. All right, now we're gonna go ahead and let our acrylic background dry. If you wanna add any given color to this, feel free. Like if I wanted to bring a little bit more yellow up in here, I could add a dot of yellow. If I wanted to add a little bit more purple, I could add a dot of red to the blue, or I could add direct purple. It's kind of nice to add tiny dots of things on the edges because sometimes in a real sunset they kind of sneak in, give us some variety. So after we let this dry, we're gonna go ahead and do our silhouette on top of it. If you wanna add like the mountains, if you wanna add the ocean, feel free. Remember, these are always your paintings, so if you wanna change it up a bit, you are more than welcome to. And if you don't wanna add any weird little indents of color, you don't have to. It's all about you, whatever you want to do. So let's start there. This brush stroke I think is still pretty pronounced, so I'm gonna just take a moment, blend it across. The way that colors work together is really what some of these are about. It's just watching how color can work. Make this look like a little cloud up here. Wispiness. So got a little cloud going on. Left the gray on the bottom. This is more of a suggestion of a cloud. You can always just kind of take some of them and build in ideas of clouds if you want. If you don't want a cloud and you just want to leave it the lines, do. Remember, it's totally up to you. If you add bits of white to different areas, but let it mix in, it's gonna light it up a bit, that area up a bit. So I just want to make sure that it pops a tiny bit more than it is right there. We want like white and yet still just a little cloud because we want it to light up with whatever colors behind it. These are not serious clouds. These are just whatever is left over of the day, right? So we got some plain old clouds going on. All right, sorry, my light changed, so I had to move my canvas. But we're gonna go ahead and add our palm trees to this particular painting. Notice that I'm using a little bit pointier paintbrush with dark color on it so that it shows up. And we're actually gonna make a couple palm trees. This first one's gonna be coming across right about here. So I'm just gonna kind of plot out about where this palm tree is gonna start. Then I think I'm gonna have a larger one that kind of drapes in right about here. Go thick to thin, we want that point on the line. Then I'm gonna have a couple come in just the edges right here. A couple on the side. Again, we're just using really simple brush strokes, watching our paintbrush. We want this pointy part, the pointed end, to be what touches the end of it. And then I think, because it's better in odds, everything's better in odds when you're doing art. So we're gonna do another one right here. And I'm just gonna extend this guy a little bit longer. And the way that we're gonna pull these paintbrush, these palms, is we're gonna start at the tip and pull back. So a palm tree has like ends, but they're little wispy ends, so we want to kind of give it that wispy type feeling. You have to work your palm tree a tiny bit. You just want the shadow of it to be what's kind of coming out. They get bigger as they go back. The palms do. If you hit some acrylic paint that's not so dry, that's okay. You have to go back through and darken them up a bit so they're really the silhouette of it. Remember, we want it to go all the way off the page because this is something from our edges of our view plane coming in. Got a little yellow there. Wash off my paintbrush. Bring it back in. If you want really refined palm, you can go through with a finer paintbrush, which I'll show you here in a second, and kind of thin out your leaves a little bit. Show you what the finer paintbrush looks like. It's more about this size. If you have a non-pointed one, they make nice sharp edges, so don't be afraid to use the square ones too, the flat brushes. Don't panic, I know that they're looking rough, but we're gonna refine these here in a second. There's always that beginning part when you're doing art where you're like, this does not look, but you have to know that once you get to the point you're like questioning how it looks, you're just at the turning point. So you gotta push through and make sure it starts to get better by adding to it. Don't abandon it. Keep pushing. Need a couple on this upside. So there's the start of some palm trees. I might go through and just pull some even finer ones out of here, just so that those edges look pointy. All right, now we're gonna go to the other side. And again, we're gonna start pulling our leaves. I started with the smaller brush on this side, but you'll see I'll have to swap to the bigger one to really make sure that the silhouette gets pulled all the way off the edge, otherwise it's a lot more work. The best part of this is to just play around with the background, try different colors, different landscapes. So if one is palm trees, maybe the next one will be oceanside with the lighthouse. Maybe it'll be the mountains. And we're just gonna keep adding some palms to this. All right, so we have our palm tree pieces in. I'm gonna move my easel up a little bit so you don't have a reflection on it. And now that we have the palm trees in, and we'll tidy them up here in a second, but what we wanna do is we wanna actually show where the sun is gonna be. And we're gonna place our sun here toward the bottom of it. So using my pointed paintbrush, I'm gonna take some white, just a tiny bit of white. You probably need less than a dime amount because it's a really small space we're gonna add the brightest part of our sun going down to. And then we're going to blend it out a tiny bit. So taking our sun, let's say it's in this area right here. I think we're gonna even make it a little bit bigger just to give it some strength. And now that we have our sun in, I'm gonna take a paper towel and just blot around the edges so it smooths it a bit, or if you have a dry brush, you can dry brush the edges. Something that's already dry, just take it, grab and pull. That way it's not a hard line. Soften, oops, getting a little crazy there. We'll come back and fix that guy up, hang on. Softens up the edges a little bit. Make sure that if you did what I just did, then pulled off paint, you can go back and add white to it and then pull it again. Let it dry a tiny bit between. That way you have less of a chance of pulling your underpaint too. There we go. Tidy that sun up. So on that side, I'm gonna put a little bit more white and I'm gonna let this part dry and then I'll pull the white back over it. So now that we have kind of where our sun is, we're gonna go ahead and we're gonna add some birds enjoying the sunset themselves. And when we do birds, you might have been used to the flying M type birds that we all seem to do when we were little. We're gonna do something similar, but instead of making an M, which is what makes these birds look less realistic, we're gonna make them thicker and thinner. So you really look at your brush weight. I'm just taking a tiny paintbrush and I'm going into my painting and I'm looking where, let's say I have a bird that's turned a bit. So this wing is gonna be a little bit larger. And then this wing is gonna be a tiny bit in the distance. This is really testing my fine motor skills. Then we'll do another one. Maybe this one's in a down flap. And you really just want to go ahead and make sure that they're thin marks. Make sure that they're kind of like the letter V, just misconstrued in different ways. So let's say this guy's got him up a little bit thicker there. I had to support my elbow while I did this. If you don't need to, I give you props. And again, I'm gonna put one in here in the distance. It's more of like a soaring. There we go. And remember, we like to work in odds. So let's do one more just to be on the safe side. And we're gonna make this little guy kind of like the straggler of the group. So there we go. We're gonna go back and tidy up our palm trees here. The way that I do that is I'm gonna take my brush, and anything that's kind of turning into a translucent, like if you can see through your palm leaf, that's a sign. So you're gonna go back through and just really balance your hand and better that tone of that paint, because we want this to be a silhouette, which means you're not seeing through any of that. We're darkening that up so it's right. So really go through and darken those. Alright, well this is where we're at the end. I'm going to go ahead and start taking off my painter's tape so that you can see this is actually graphics tape. And then I'll show you my final. Alright, so now that we finished up taking off painter's tape and everything else, this is our final. Alright, so this is our final after taking off our painter's tape and everything else. Keep in mind, you guys are always going to know all of your little oopses, because I can already see mine, but that's not the important part. The important part is the creation part. Hopefully you've gotten something out of this video. Remember, on landscapes, that things that are higher up on the paper or canvas are further away. Things that are lower are closer. So as you continue in your painting journey, please make sure that you keep practicing those basic landscape skills. And this is your first basic painting done.